In a quiet riverside town in northern Thailand, the mornings arrive like a whisper. Fog hugs the surface of the water like a lover reluctant to part. The sun never rises quickly here. It slowly seeps in, filtering through the bamboo groves, casting long, half-real shadows. Locals speak softly before the sun fully rises, and no one goes walking near the river before dawn. Except sometimes she does. It's always a woman. You'll know her by the way she walks, not forward, but backward. Deliberate, quiet, barefoot. She wears a long, pale sarong. Her hair is black, wet, and clings to her back as if it never dries. She hums, but no one's ever been able to say what tune it is. And most of all, you must never look down at her feet. That's what the old man at the floating market told Liam. Liam Grant was 29, a travel vlogger who'd grown tired of the cities and temples that made up every tourist's feed. Bangkok, Chiang Mai, Ayutthaya. They were beautiful, yes, but overdone. His subscribers were hungry for something real, something untouched. He heard about Ban Na Swan by accident on a forum for urban explorers. No hostels, no hotels, but there's a woman who rents rooms above her noodle shop. No Wi-Fi, you'll love it. That was all it took. Liam arrived just after sunset, camera gear stuffed in his bag, a GoPro clipped to his chest like a badge. The air was damp and fragrant with lemongrass and river salt. The streets were empty. Only a few lanterns bobbed in the breeze outside shuttered homes. He found the noodle shop easily. It was the only building with lights still on, and the scent of broth curled like fingers into the night. The woman who ran it was old but spry. She didn't speak English, but when he showed her the forum message and pointed upstairs, she just nodded, handed him a key, and returned to skimming fat from her soup. The room was small and wooden, with a fan that creaked like it had secrets. The windows faced the river. It was quiet, peaceful, until just before dawn. The first time Liam saw her, he wasn't even fully awake. It was around 5 a.m. The horizon was still bruised with the night's color. He'd left the window open. Something, he didn't know what, had stirred him from sleep. Then he heard it. A soft scraping, like bare feet on wet wooden planks. He rolled over and looked out the window. There she was, a woman, perhaps mid-30s, slim, with long black hair that reached her waist. Her white sarong dragged slightly behind her as she moved. But what made Liam freeze, what rooted his breath inside his chest, was the way she walked. Backward. Her spine was straight, her head faced away from him. Her arms dangled loosely at her sides. And though the path she walked was uneven, full of loose stones and knotted roots, she never stumbled, never turned. She moved slowly, like something rehearsed. Liam blinked, reached for his phone, hit record. But when he looked back up, she was gone. No splashes, no rustling, just gone, like fog. At breakfast, he asked the noodle shop owner, "River woman, woman walking backward." She stiffened, eyes narrowed. She said something in Thai too fast for Liam to catch, then shook her head, made an X with her arms, and muttered only 2 English words, "No feet." He stared. "No feet?" She tapped the side of her head and pointed at him with a disapproving glare. "Don't look." He laughed, awkward. Okay, I won't." But of course, he would. That's what he was here for, wasn't he? That night, Liam checked the footage. The video was grainy, but it was there. Just a glimpse. A white figure near the riverbank, her head turned away, walking backwards. Then, static. The file corrupted itself. He tried to play it again. The screen blinked and went black. His laptop fan whirred louder, and just before he shut it, he thought he saw something in the reflection of the screen. His own face, but slightly off. The eyes were too wide. He shook his head. Jet lag, that's all. The second morning, he set up a tripod by the window, left it running. This time, she appeared closer, just a few meters from the house, her steps slower, the hum louder. And Liam saw something that made him freeze. She wasn't leaving footprints. Even in the soft, wet mud near the river, the earth remained untouched. He held his breath as she passed a broken lantern post. It tilted slightly toward her, as if drawn. Then for a second, just a second, her head twitched, not fully turning, just a jerk, unnatural, like a puppet with a loose string. And the hum stopped. She stood still, back to him. The morning was utterly silent. Then she took another step, backward, and vanished behind the tall grass. That day, Liam walked into the village and asked about her. People turned away. One woman handed him a packet of incense and said only, "Temple." Another spat on the ground and muttered a word that sounded like "pime." Back at the noodle shop, the owner refused to serve him dinner. She handed him a boiled egg and shut the counter early. Liam sat by the river alone that night. The wind picked up just before dawn, and then he heard her. Step, step, step. He didn't go to the window. He just sat on the floor, clutching his camera. But the sound came closer and closer. Then, silence. And then, 3 taps on the window pane. He counted. 1, 2, 3. When he finally got the courage to look, there was nothing there, except a small, wet footprint on the inside of the glass. Liam didn't sleep that morning. The wet footprint on the inside of the glass, small, clear, unmistakably human, had evaporated by sunrise. But the unease it left behind didn't. He kept the window shut that night, taped the curtains down, set his tripod to record every angle. But at the back of his mind, something whispered, "Don't look at her feet." Why? What was it about her feet? He decided to go to the temple. The only one in town sat on a mossy hill just beyond the banana groves. It wasn't large or particularly beautiful, no gold rooftops or dragon statues, just a faded wooden structure with 2 lion guardians missing their teeth. The monk who lived there was gaunt, with hands folded like dried bamboo leaves. When Liam mentioned the woman by the river, the monk's eyes opened, not wide in shock, but slow, like he'd been expecting this question. "She walks backward," Liam said. The monk didn't answer immediately. Instead, he poured tea, let it cool. Only after both cups had steamed dry did he speak in careful English. "Do you believe in unfinished rituals?" Liam tilted his head. "Like ghosts?" The monk nodded. "Nobody dies alone, but some do not know they are dead." "What happens then?" "They repeat," a pause, "what was not finished." The story came slowly, like smoke from damp wood. A long time ago, maybe 60, maybe 80 years ago, a woman in the village was accused of witchcraft. She was beautiful, strange, lived near the river, alone. Some said she whispered to the trees. Others said her husband vanished after she gave birth. Her daughter died young. After that, things got worse. Crops failed. Cows were born with no eyes. Children had nightmares. Then one morning, an entire family was found drowned in their hut with no sign of flooding. The villagers snapped. They dragged her out before sunrise. They said she cursed them because her daughter's soul had not passed on. They forced her to perform an old ritual, one that would, quote, pull her curse away. It required her to walk backward from her home to the river before the sun fully rose, carrying the ashes of her dead child. And she obeyed. But before she finished, someone looked at her feet. No one remembers who, but the moment they did, something went wrong. She stopped walking, looked back, her face twisted, then she vanished into the fog. Some say she drowned herself. Others say she never stopped walking. Liam leaned forward. What happens if I look at her feet? The monk didn't blink. You stop seeing the world. That night, Liam couldn't get those words out of his head. He played the newest footage. At 5:07 a.m., she appeared again, from the left side of the frame, her steps exactly 6 seconds apart. He froze the frame as she passed. Her face was hidden, her posture unchanged. But this time, Liam didn't listen to the warning. He zoomed in, slowly, down to her feet. They were wrong. They weren't human. They looked like hands. 2 pale hands with long, water-wrinkled fingers curled downward where feet should have been. Her sarong didn't drag. It clung to the wrists like she was walking on all fours, in reverse, upside down. Liam's mouth went dry. His ears rang. He paused the video, then shut the laptop. In the silence, he heard it again. A hum, faint, distant. He turned. The curtain fluttered, even though the window was still taped shut. The next morning, the noodle shop owner refused to let him in. She shouted something in Thai, threw a pack of incense at his chest, and slammed the shutters. Liam stood outside, stunned. He hadn't even said anything. At the temple, the monk was gone. Only an offering bowl with blackened lotus stems remained. He wandered the market, asked questions. No one answered. But a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, tugged at his sleeve as he passed. She looked up at him and whispered, "You saw her hands, didn't you?" He blinked. The girl held up a doll. It had its feet broken off and 2 plastic hands glued on upside down. "She's angry now," the girl said. "Why?" "Because you looked where no one is supposed to look." Then she ran off. Liam went back to the river. He brought salt, incense, and a small clay figure he bought from a stall, a figure of a mother holding a child. He placed them all at the water's edge, waited. The air felt thick, like soup about to boil. Then the wind shifted, the reeds rustled, and she appeared, closer than before, maybe 10 feet away, walking backward. The hum rose again, slower this time. Liam stood frozen. He clenched his fists, whispered, "I'm sorry." But she stopped, still facing away. Then, slowly, her head tilted, farther and farther, until it was nearly upside down, and she whispered something in Thai, a language Liam didn't know, but somehow he understood it. You looked. Then she turned. She turned, and Liam's world tilted. It wasn't just the way her neck twisted unnaturally, or the hiss of wet muscle as it cracked into place. It was her face, pale, hollow, eyes clouded over like still pond water, yet somehow aware. Her mouth was open, but not in a scream. No, it was worse. It was in relief. As if she had finally found someone who saw what they weren't supposed to. Her lips moved. No sound came out, but Liam heard it, inside, like a voice echoing within his skull. "Give me your eyes." He staggered back, tripped on the slope. His hand scraped to rock. Blood trickled. But she didn't move. She only stood there. Feet, hands, whatever they were, buried in the soft mud. Her arms beginning to rise, like a puppet with broken strings, lifted by invisible force. Then, just before she stepped forward, the rising sun broke through the fog, and she vanished. Again. Gone in a blink. No ripple, no whisper, nothing but the sound of Liam's breath hammering his ribs. That morning, everything changed. The light hurt, not just a little. Liam squinted even in shade. His pupils refused to contract properly. The edges of objects seemed blurred, like he was underwater. And worse, he could no longer see his own reflection. In the mirror, in his laptop screen, in shop windows. Everywhere he looked, his face was absent. Where he should be was just a vague smear, a smudge on the world. He ran to the only place that might help, the home of the oldest person in the village. Her name was May Bois. She was 92, blind in one eye, and hadn't left her bamboo house in 15 years. But people still left rice at her gate, called her the Whisper Keeper. When she opened the door, she didn't seem surprised to see him. "You looked," she said in shaky English. Liam's mouth opened, but he didn't know what to say. She waved him inside, lit a candle. The flame flickered like it feared being watched. May Bois poured a bowl of water, dipped a spoon in, and dropped 7 grains of rice into it. Then she stared at the surface, though she was sure she couldn't see. "She only comes to those who are hollow inside." "What does that mean?" Liam asked, voice hoarse. "You carry grief, maybe not for a person, maybe for a part of yourself, the broken part. She sees it." "I don't—" She stopped. May Bois nodded, as if she heard his unfinished thought. "She doesn't take everyone, only those who look down, not just at her, but at themselves." Liam blinked, his vision blurred again. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to—" "To record her? To expose her? You tried to trap a ghost inside glass." She leaned forward. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Now she's inside you." That night, Liam tried not to sleep. The shadows moved, even when the wind didn't. He closed his eyes and saw her. Not a dream, not a memory, but her, inside the room, walking backward toward him, slowly, impossibly slow, across the floor of his mind. Each step brought a pressure, like something unseen pushing on his temples, warping his thoughts. He screamed in the dream, but no sound came. And then, Just before she reached him, he saw himself, but not as himself, as a reflection with no eyes. He woke gasping, eyes burning. The mirror above the sink cracked without reason, and behind him he heard a squelch, a wet footstep. Liam turned, but no one was there. Only a trail, mud, clear, slimy, leading from the corner of the room to the window, the closed window. He checked his phone. The camera app refused to open. The screen glitched, flickered, then died. Even technology wouldn't look at her now. He ran, packed his things, left money on the counter, didn't say goodbye. But the road out of the village was gone. Not blocked, not broken, just gone. In its place, a thick mist, white, heavy, and endless. No GPS signal, no cell service, no signs. He turned back. The village looked different. Colors washed out. People faded. Shops shuttered. No sound, no breeze. Just the river, still moving. And beside it, her. Not walking now, just standing, facing him. She was facing him, not walking, not humming, just standing at the water's edge, as still as the lotus leaves drifting behind her. But Liam couldn't see her face clearly, because the world around him seemed softened, as if reality had lost its sharpness. The colors were pale, the air was thick. Even his thoughts felt like they moved slower now. And then she moved. Not toward him, but back into the river, still facing him, still watching. Step by step, she walked backward into the water. Her sarong soaked through. Her long black hair began to float. Her hands, feet, vanished beneath the surface, until only her face remained above the current. Not drowning, not floating, just staring. And then, just before her head submerged completely, she smiled. Liam stumbled back. He wanted to scream, to call someone, to wake up, but there was no one to hear. The town was silent, emptied of sound. Even the birds had vanished. He ran. His feet hit the cracked dirt road, past the bamboo groves, past the temple. But the path never turned. It only circled. Every turn led him back to the river, and every time she was there. Sometimes in the water, sometimes on the far bank, once inside a tree's reflection. Always watching, always smiling. 3 days passed like a dream he couldn't shake. He stopped eating. Water tasted like salt. His phone refused to charge. The villagers, those he saw, no longer looked at him. Their faces blurred, their mouths stitched shut by silence. And the monk? Gone. Only the lions remained, their eyes now hollowed out. On the fourth dawn, Liam woke to the sound of scratching. Not at the door, not at the floor, inside the walls. He pressed his ear to the wood. Scratch, scratch, scratch. A whisper followed, so faint it barely existed. You looked down. Now you walk for me. His eyes snapped open. He was standing, not in bed, standing outside, by the river. His feet were in the mud, bare. The sun hadn't risen yet. And next to him, she stood. Not facing him this time, but beside him, staring forward, toward the hills, her head slowly tilted, as if inviting him to look in the same direction. Liam followed her gaze. A path, not a road, not one he had seen before, but a narrow, ancient trail of stones, faint carvings, like footprints that had been walked 1,000 times. And suddenly, he understood. This wasn't about death or punishment. It was a ritual, one she had never finished. And now she needed a witness, someone to walk it with her, someone who had already broken the rule. Liam didn't know why he did it. Maybe he was too far gone. Maybe part of him believed that finishing her path would set them both free. Or maybe, just maybe, he was already hers. He stepped forward. She did too. Not beside him now, but ahead and backward. Always backward. He walked forward, she walked in reverse. Together, they crossed the stone path that led into the mist, not speaking, not touching, but connected, somehow. As they walked, the landscape began to shift. Trees turned to black silhouettes. The sky didn't lighten with dawn, it darkened. Time no longer felt real. And then, after what felt like hours, they reached a stone gate. Carved into it were words Liam couldn't read, but felt deep inside his chest. Finish what was broken, return what was taken. The woman stopped, turned only slightly, and spoke for the first time, not with her lips, but through every bone in his body. You must not look, even now. Then she walked backward through the gate and vanished. Liam stood alone, his skin cold, his mouth dry. And then behind him, he heard steps, backwards steps, soft, wet, too close. He turned around and saw himself. But it wasn't just him. It was his reflection, eyes missing, face pale, feet, not feet, hands. The thing smiled and whispered, "Now you remember." Then everything went black. The blackness didn't feel like sleep. It felt like being unplugged from time, from space, from himself. Liam didn't know how long he'd been drifting in it, but when the world returned, it came with pain. His body ached, his feet were raw, the soles bled, and yet he was still walking. Stone beneath him, damp air in his lungs, the scent of river mud and something older, rot maybe, or memory. He looked down and stopped breathing. The ground was moving, not in a physical sense, no trembling, no cracks, but the shadows under the stones shimmered like hundreds of shapes crawling just beneath the surface. Hands, fingers, her feet. They pulsed with every step, reaching, recoiling. Liam stepped off the path. Immediately, the air shifted. The fog thinned, the wind returned, and most of all, her humming stopped. He turned. Behind him, the woman stood. Only now, she looked different, younger, her features softer, the sadness in her eyes finely visible. And she was no longer walking. She was kneeling, hands clasped, as if begging, not for mercy, for completion. Liam suddenly remembered something he hadn't thought of in years. His sister. She died when they were children. An accident, river drowning. He was there. He saw. He froze. And for all his life, he never told anyone. Guilt lived in him like mold on old bread, quiet, hidden, feeding in the dark. Maybe that's why the woman had found him. Maybe unfinished rituals always find unfinished souls. She raised one hand, pointed to the path ahead, and whispered, barely audible, "Keep walking." So he did. For hours, or days, or lifetimes. The stones beneath his feet turned from gray to red to black. The fog pressed tighter. Every step became a weight. Sometimes he saw others, figures in the mist, walking alone, each trailing a memory behind them like a funeral ribbon. A boy carrying a teddy bear, a woman cradling a bundle of cloth soaked in blood, an old man dragging a broken violin, all of them walking forward, with someone else walking backward before them. None looked up, none spoke. Liam understood now. This wasn't a curse. It was a procession. A path for grief to find its ending. A ritual for the broken to carry their brokenness until it dissolved into fog. He felt his eyes sting, not with tears, but with burning. He touched his face. His cheeks were wet, not with salt water, but with ink, thick, black, smearing down from empty sockets. His vision blurred further. Shapes bled together. The road cracked, and the whisper returned. "Walk until you vanish. Only then are you free." He reached a bend in the path, and ahead the river again. Not the same one. This one was still, flat like obsidian glass, no current, no wind. And in the center of it, a stone altar, old, broken, cradling a child-sized skeleton wrapped in silk. The woman waited beside it, not smiling, not sad, just waiting. Liam stepped into the water. It was cold, but not painful. Each footstep rippled gently. Nothing pulled him down. He crossed to the altar, kneeling, facing her. She opened her arms not to embrace him, but to release the bundle. She lowered it into the water, and for the first time, she turned to face the rising sun. It was over. She faded into mist, not violently, peacefully, as if unbecoming herself, unbinding from the ritual. And Liam, he was alone. The sun rose, the path dissolved, and the river whispered only one word: remember. When he opened his eyes again, he was in a hospital bed, Bangkok. He had collapsed at a train station, barefoot, mumbling in English and Thai. They found his camera, but every video was corrupted. His passport was soaked. His eyes were fine. The doctors found nothing wrong. But Liam never made videos again. He never traveled again. But he walked, every morning, alone, before sunrise, one slow step at a time, not looking down, not looking back, just walking, until one day he was gone. Liam disappeared the same way fog does at dawn, quietly, without resistance, and only noticed after it's too late. No one saw him leave his apartment in Bangkok. No security camera caught him at the front gate. His shoes were left neatly by the door, his wallet still on the counter. And yet, by the next morning, he was simply gone. But in the years that followed, stories began to surface. In Chiang Rai, a street vendor swore she saw a barefoot foreign man walking backward at the edge of the Mekong. In Luang Prabang, a child pointed toward the river at dawn and asked her mother, "Why is the pale man walking behind the lady with the long hair?" And in a village few maps still named, Ban Na Suan, an old woman at a noodle shop began leaving a bowl of rice and a cup of tea at the river's edge each morning. She never said for whom, but every so often she would look up at the fog and murmur, "There are more now." May Bua, the Whisper Keeper, was the only one who truly understood. "They don't die," she said one night to no one in particular. "They just keep walking, because grief has no destination, only direction." Her vision had long since gone, but even in blindness she knew there were footsteps that never left marks. There were prayers without gods, and there were people, living people, who had looked too deeply at what wasn't meant for the eyes. In a town across the border, a monk awoke one morning to find his temple gate smeared with muddy fingerprints. He found no tracks, no intruders, but by the gate someone had left a small object, a broken camera. Inside the memory card, one intact file, a single video, exactly 6 seconds long. The image, a man walking forward, a woman walking backward, their silhouettes wrapped in mist, and beneath them, no shadows. That monk, now old and silent, keeps the video on a flash drive hidden beneath a loose floorboard. He doesn't show it to anyone. But on some mornings, when the fog is especially heavy, he kneels before the river and whispers a name he never learned. Liam. Because some people don't vanish in the usual way. They don't crash, don't bleed, don't burn. They just cross over, one step at a time, until they are no longer separate from the thing they tried to understand. Until the ritual claims them, not in death, but in duty. And so the river remembers every footstep, every whisper, every eye that looked where it should not have. Because once you walk that path, you are part of it, forever. Tourism returned to Ban Na Suan, not in buses, not in banners, just a slow trickle of curious travelers chasing whispers on forgotten forums. Urban explorers, ghost chasers, the spiritually bored. They heard of the backward woman, of the man who vanished, and like Liam before them, they came looking for proof. The town remained quiet. No advertisements, no guidebooks, just the same crooked path along the river, the same mist that clung to the morning like it had nowhere else to go. One such traveler was Erin Shaw, a documentary student from Melbourne. She had read Liam's last forum posts, the strange corruption in his camera files, the rumors about walking rituals and mirror ghosts. She didn't believe in ghosts, but she believed in stories. And stories, she said, have gravity. Erin arrived just before the rainy season. She booked a room above the old noodle shop, though the owner, now almost entirely mute, tried to refuse her. The woman crossed her arms, shook her head, then finally, reluctantly, handed her the key with trembling hands. Erin noticed incense sticks lined in rows by the window. 7 of them, burned down to the same length. "Who are these for?" she asked. The old woman didn't answer, only glanced at the river, then whispered, "Too many feet now." That night, Erin set up her equipment, 2 night vision cameras, 1 drone, 1 body cam. But no sound came, no movement, until 4:53 a.m., when the fog came in from the wrong direction, from the inland, not the river, and with it, humming, soft, slow, familiar. Erin turned to the window and saw her, the woman in the white sarong, back arched, hair dripping, walking backward toward the river. Erin grabbed her camera, bolted out barefoot, and followed. The town didn't stir. No dogs barked. No doors opened. She followed the figure to the edge of the bamboo grove, but there she stopped, because the woman wasn't alone. There were others, more than a dozen, some men, some women, all walking backward, some young, some impossibly old, their arms limp, their necks bent, their feet hidden. Erin's breath caught, her camera lens fogged. One of them, tall, pale, thin, paused, slowly turned his head. It was Liam. He looked right at her and mouthed, "Don't wake the fog." Then the world tilted. Erin's footage was found weeks later, her gear abandoned near the river. Authorities said it was monsoon flooding, a current too strong, an accident. But the locals said otherwise, because after Erin vanished, the humming grew louder, and the fog came earlier, stayed longer, pressed harder. The monk from the Wang Prabang, now near death, was asked to speak at a seminar on cultural hauntings. He declined. Instead, he sent 1 envelope to the university. Inside, a flash drive and a note. "They don't walk because they're cursed. They walk because no one else will carry what they left behind. When you wake the fog, you walk too." There's a stretch of land near Ban Na Swan that no one builds on. No houses, no shrines, only reeds, mud, and an eerie silence that never breaks, even when the wind howls. Locals call it Nakhon Wat Rueng, the city without shadows. No one remembers how it got the name, but everyone knows what it means. If you see someone standing there at sunrise and they cast no shadow, you must not speak to them, not even if they call your name. It was at that very spot that a Thai-American journalist named Darren Songchai came in search of a story. She wasn't a ghost hunter. She wasn't chasing legends. She was chasing the truth about her cousin, Erin Shaw. Darren and Erin had grown up like sisters, and when Erin vanished, the family called it a tragic accident. But Darren never believed that, because before Erin went missing, she sent Darren one message: "If I don't come back, check the shadows. They're wrong here." Darren arrived with a translator, an interpreter, and more skepticism than faith. But by her third day in Ban Na Swan, the translator left, the interpreter stopped speaking, and Darren began hearing whispers from the river, even when no one was near. One morning, she stood at the edge of the Nakanwat Rueng fields, watching the fog shift like curtains in an abandoned house, and she saw them. Figures, half real, gliding, but not walking, just existing. Their forms shimmered faintly, more like smudges than people. Darren lifted her phone, took a photo. Nothing appeared. She stepped closer. Then the wind shifted, and suddenly they were clear. Men, women, teenagers, children, all walking backward, their arms hanging, their hair drifting behind them, their eyes closed. But worst of all, none of them cast shadows. Not a single one. Darren froze, her breath fogged in the air. Then, one of them turned. A woman with soaked hair and a white sarong, the original one, the first. She didn't open her eyes. She only pointed behind Darren. Darren turned slowly and saw Aaron standing 10 feet away, dry, alive-looking, wearing the same hoodie she had in her last video, but her expression was empty, as if waiting. "Aaron?" Darren whispered. Aaron didn't answer. She only lifted one hand, then pressed her index finger to her lips. Shh. Then pointed at the ground, at Darren's shadow, which had begun to fade, right before her eyes. Darren stumbled back. Her legs gave out. She dropped her phone. The screen cracked. And then, humming. Low, deep, not one voice, dozens, all around her, moving in sync, walking backward in a circle around her. Darren screamed, but the sound died in her throat. The fog wrapped tighter. Cold seeped into her skin. And just before she blacked out, she heard Aaron's voice, not from the air, but from inside her head. "Don't let them take your shadow, or you'll walk until you forget what your name is." She woke at sunset, alone. Her phone was gone, her backpack untouched, and her shadow was back, but flickering at the edges, as if unsure whether it belonged to her. That night, Darren left Ban Na Swan, but not before carving something into the side of the noodle shop with a pocket knife. If they don't cast a shadow, they're not here to stay, but neither are you. Back in Bangkok, Darren never spoke of it again. She changed careers. She stopped taking photos. And every morning, before the sun fully rose, she checked her feet and whispered her own name, just to be sure she still remembered it. Some ghosts don't haunt places. They haunt names. They cling to the memory of being remembered. And once they hear your name, they keep whispering it until you answer. That's what happened to Noah Tang, a Singaporean podcaster who specialized in Southeast Asian folklore. He wasn't afraid of ghost stories. In fact, he made a living from them. His podcast, Veiled Between Worlds, had over 1 million followers, and when he caught wind of the Ban Na Swan disappearances, he thought he had struck gold. Aaron Shaw, Liam Grant, Darin Song Chai. 3 names, 3 vanishings. Same place, same rumor. She only comes for those who hear their name whispered before sunrise. Noah flew to Thailand, accompanied by his sound technician, Min, and a field recorder he called the Eater, because it picked up everything, even sounds human ears missed. He wasn't trying to debunk the myth. He wanted to catch it, and maybe talk to it. The first 2 nights they camped near the river with full-spectrum mics and motion sensors. Nothing happened. But on the 3rd night, at exactly 4:44 a.m., the fog rolled in faster than usual. And then, something spoke. Not from the trees, not from the reeds, but directly into the Eater. A whisper, drawn out, wet-sounding, female. 1 word, Noah. Then silence. The next night it came again, earlier this time. Noah. And then again, softer. Noah. Min wanted to leave. Noah didn't. He was obsessed now. He played the whispers back on a loop, convinced there was something beneath the name, a second voice, a harmony like 2 mouths speaking at once. He slowed it down, filtered it, and finally, on the 5th night, he heard the second layer. It wasn't saying his name. It was saying, he looked down, he looked down. That same night, Noah dreamed of the river. But in the dream, it was upside down, flowing into the sky, while people walked backward on the surface, like insects crawling on glass. At the center stood the woman. Her sarong floated around her like tendrils, and her face was gone. Not hidden, not blurred, just missing, as if it had been removed. In its place was his name, carved into bone. He woke to Min shaking him. "You were whispering," she said, "all night. You kept saying, 'Let me see her feet.'" Noah didn't remember that, but his pillow was damp, his fingernails caked with river mud. They hadn't been near the river that night. Min packed and left the next day. Noah stayed, alone now. The whispers grew louder, not just once a night, now every hour. In the static of his headset, in the buzz of the power bank, even in the turning of pages in his journal. And always, always the same. Noah. He looked down. Now he walks. On the 7th morning, he finally spoke back. He stood at the edge of the river, eyes heavy, and whispered into the recorder, "What do you want?" The fog thickened. The world went still. And a voice, not a whisper, but a breath, answered from behind him. "I want you to know what it means to be remembered, without a face." He turned, and she was there. But this time, she wasn't walking backward. She was floating, inches above the ground, her sarong undisturbed, her hair alive like smoke, and her head slowly tilted. Not in question, but in invitation. Noah stepped forward, and she opened her arms, but instead of embracing him, she leaned in, placed her lips near his ear, and exhaled his name. Noah. And in that breath, he forgot everything. His podcast, his language, his country, his voice. All that remained was his name, spoken back to him in thousands of different voices, each one a person who had looked, each one now part of the whisper. That night, a fisherman found Noah's field recorder half submerged near the riverbank. The last entry was 17 minutes of silence. Then, softly, 2 words. She knows. It started like every other morning in Bana Swan, a pale sun trying to pierce through a curtain of fog, the scent of damp earth, the sound of wooden boats rocking gently against the docks. But on that day, no birds sang, no dogs barked, no rooster called the dawn, because the fog didn't rise, it thickened. By noon, it hadn't burned off. By afternoon, it had grown colder, and by nightfall, it had pressed against every door like an unwanted visitor. At first, the villagers lit incense. Some poured salt along their windowsills. Others whispered prayers they hadn't used in years. But even the monks stayed inside. Even May Bua, the whisper keeper, refused to open her mouth, because she knew when the fog stays past dusk, it means someone answered back. That someone was a girl named Lynn, 17 years old, with a cracked phone and a curiosity bigger than her fear. She lived near the edge of the Nakanwat Ryong field, the place of no shadows. Her grandmother had warned her since childhood, "Don't talk to the fog, it listens." But Lynn was bored, restless, and she had seen something that changed everything. The night before the fog came, Lynn took a photo of herself in her bedroom mirror, just for fun. But when she looked at the picture, she wasn't alone. Behind her, barely visible, was a woman in white, back facing the camera, hair soaked, and feet just off the ground. Lynn stared, zoomed in, and then she noticed she had no shadow. Not the ghost, Lynn. In the photo, Lynn's feet were planted on the ground, but no shadow touched it. She didn't sleep that night. At 2:17 a.m., her phone vibrated with a notification. Voice memo received. No sender, no icon, just a play button. She pressed it. A sound like wet fabric dragging on stone. A single breath, and then, Ling, Ling, you saw me. Now I see you. The voice was her own, but reversed, distorted, like something wearing her. The next morning, the fog didn't leave, and neither did Ling's reflection. She stopped casting one. Her mirror began to show things before they happened. She reached for a cup. Her reflection reached first. She blinked. Her reflection didn't. By noon, the mirror smiled at her. She didn't smile back. That night, Ling went to the river. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't take her phone. She wore white and walked backward into the fog. By morning, the town was silent. Every mirror in Ban Na Swan cracked at the same hour, 5:04 a.m. The old noodle shop owner stopped cooking. Mebua lit her final candle, and the temple bell rang once, without wind. No one saw Ling again, but something else took her place. A new figure in the fog, younger, smaller, with eyes wide open and mouth stitched shut with silence. Now, when the woman in white walks backward before sunrise, she is no longer alone. There's a girl beside her, also walking backward, also watching, also smiling. And on some mornings, when the fog refuses to rise, if you stand near the river with your back to the wind, you might hear two voices calling your name in unison. If you answer, you'll never cast a shadow again.
Rivers don't remember like people do. They don't store memories in thoughts or photographs. They carry them in silence, in silt, in the things that sink. After Ling vanished, Ban Na Swan became quieter than ever. People stopped going out before dawn. Children weren't allowed near mirrors. And most terrifying of all, the fog stopped warning before it came. One morning, it just was, already there before anyone woke. And that's when the villagers began to notice the river was changing. It moved slower. Its reflection grew darker. Sometimes it showed things that weren't there. One boy claimed he saw his dead father rowing a boat made of hair. A woman said she watched her unborn child waving at her from the ripples. Even the old monk at the ruined temple, once unshakable, refused to face the water anymore, because one night he saw his own funeral floating across it. But the river's worst memory was of the ritual, the one they made the woman in white perform, the one they never let her finish, the one broken by a single disobedient glance. The villagers thought time had erased it, but the river didn't forget, and now it had begun to bring that moment back. Each dawn, the same scene began replaying, a procession, a woman walking backward, a line of followers behind her, some real, some echoes, and at the front, waiting by the shore, a little child in white silk, always half faded, always with empty eyes. Locals started calling it the memory loop. They stopped watching, they stopped whispering, but the river kept showing it, over and over and over, until one man tried to intervene. His name was Pirate, a young police officer transferred to the district. He didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in closure and files. He thought the missing persons were a cult thing. He even suspected the noodle shop owner of covering something up. One morning, he waded into the shallows with a GoPro on his chest and shouted, "I don't care who you are! Step out now!" The river did not move. The fog didn't rise. But something stepped up from the water. Not the woman. Lin. Soaking. Still. Her mouth sewn shut. Eyes wide with sorrow, not malice. She raised one finger, pointed at Firat, then pointed down. He followed her gesture and saw himself in the river, floating, not the way reflections do, but limp, bloated, dead, wearing the same uniform, same face, only the eyes were missing. Firat screamed, but his body didn't move, only his reflection did, smiling, then reaching up from under the water. He was found hours later, sitting on the riverbank, eyes open, breathing, but never speaking again. All he could do was trace circles into the dirt with his finger, over and over. When asked what happened, the only thing he ever said, once in a whisper, was this: "She's not angry. She's remembering." And now, each time someone disappears in Ban Na Swan, the fog gets thicker. Each time someone whispers into the river, a ripple echoes with someone else's voice. Because the river no longer forgets, and it doesn't forgive either. Some say it's no longer a body of water, it's a body of memory. A sacred wound that keeps itself open so the pain never dulls. And if you stand too close, if your grief is loud enough, if your shadow flickers just once, it might remember you too. There's a house in Ban Na Swan that no one claims. It has no address, no path leading to it, no name on the gate. But it's always there, hidden behind the reeds near the farthest bend of the river. Wooden, slanted, with windows that don't reflect and a door that never stays shut. Locals call it Ban Long Pra, the house that faces backwards, because no matter which side you approach it from, it's always turned the other way. Most villagers pretend it doesn't exist. Those who've seen it up close don't speak anymore. But the whispers say this: that's where she lived, the woman in white, and that's where the ritual began. The morning they dragged her out, forced her to carry the ashes of her dead child, and made her walk backward toward the river, step by step, breath by breath, until someone looked. Someone broke the rule, and she never made it home again. Now the house waits. Its door creaks open in the fog. Its floorboards echo with memories, and its mirrors face each other. Niran, a Bangkok architecture student, didn't believe any of this. He came to Ban Na Swan on a research grant, studying forgotten village layouts and ghost house orientation, an ancient Thai belief that houses should never face west unless you want to invite spirits. But the old records confused him, because in the village's original plans, Ban Long Pra didn't exist. It had no coordinates, no mention in land deeds, not even aerial photos showed it. But when Niran asked an old vendor about it, the man grew pale and said, "If you see it, don't go inside. If you go inside, don't face the mirrors. And if you see yourself walk in after you, run." That warning didn't stop Niran. He wanted the truth, and he found it. At 5:02 a.m. on the 7th day of fieldwork, he saw the house. Just past the river bend, veiled by fog, the roof hunched like a sleeping animal. He crossed the bamboo bridge, pushed open the gate, and stepped onto the porch. It smelled of wet silk and burnt incense. A single bell hung from the awning. It didn't ring. Inside, the house was empty, but not still. The walls breathed. The wood creaked without weight, and every mirror reflected something wrong. One showed Niran facing away from himself. Another showed him smiling while he wasn't. A third, cracked and dusted, showed the woman in white seated calmly in the farthest room. But when he turned, no one was there. He called out. Nothing. He walked deeper. Every step echoed twice. He found a room with 7 bowls on the floor, each filled with river water. In the center, a child's sandal, old, rotten, but still wet. And above it, scrawled into the ceiling, were words not written in paint, but in fingernail scrapes. She didn't forget. She's just waiting for someone to remember her. Then came the footsteps. Behind him, bare, slow, wet. Niran turned and saw himself. Not a reflection, another him, walking backward into the room, face slack, eyes weeping black water, and feet, hands, dragging across the floor. Nuran screamed, ran, but the house kept turning. Corridors reversed, doors led back to rooms he'd never entered, and behind him the backward self whispered, "I am who walks when you forget why you stopped." He finally burst through the front door, only to find the river in front of him again, but the house was still behind him, still facing the other way. He left Ban Naswan the next morning, burned his clothes, deleted his footage, but one mirror in his apartment still shows him standing backward. Every now and then, just before sleep, he hears the floor creak and sees wet footprints on the tile. They always lead to the mirror, never away from it, because Ban Lang Pra isn't a house. It's a memory made solid, a wound built from wood, a place the ritual carved into reality to never forget what was stolen. And the moment you step inside, you carry part of the ritual out with you. They say she never runs, the woman in white, the one who walks backward through fog. Her steps are always slow, deliberate, like someone moving through the memory of pain. But what no one ever asked was, what happens if she starts to run? The story came from a man named Tasipan, a night ferry worker on the Chao Phraya River. He wasn't from Ban Naf Soon. He had only passed near it once, briefly, when heavy rain forced his boat inland. He had never heard the stories, never seen the fog. But one night, he picked up an emergency fare, a foreigner, standing alone at a collapsed dock, soaking wet, clutching a backpack and an old camcorder. The man said his name was Liam. Tasipan remembered him clearly. He looked normal, but his eyes didn't blink, not once during the entire trip. And when asked where he was headed, Liam just said, "Anywhere the river forgets." That same night, Tasipan docked briefly at a sleepy village near the northern bend. The fog rolled in fast, unnaturally fast, and the river went still. He told the foreigner to wait on board. He stepped off the ferry to check a mooring rope. That's when he heard it. Footsteps, in reverse, coming too fast. He turned, saw nothing. Then, a blur, white, wet, moving backward down the shore, but not walking, running. The woman in white, her sarong trailing, her hair flying in slow motion. And the worst part, she wasn't alone. Behind her, at least 12 others, all walking backward, some twisted, some child-sized, some with no heads. And they were all chasing someone, not Liam, him. Tasipan stumbled back onto the boat, cut the rope with a hatchet, and pushed off with all the force in his body. As the engine coughed to life, he saw the woman in white stop at the river's edge, her head tilted, farther than humanly possible. And for the first time, she looked at him, right into his eyes, and her mouth moved. "You looked, you laughed, now run." He did, and he kept running, metaphorically, for the rest of his life. Quit the ferry, burned his clothes, left Thailand. But every night, in the moments between waking and sleep, he hears wet feet pounding behind him, always backward, always faster. Locals in Ban Naswan say the ritual has changed. She no longer waits, she pursues. Those who mock,
those who film, those who dare to challenge the story online, they receive a gift, a voicemail, a backwards dream, a wet footprint on the inside of their window. And then she starts walking. But if they ignore her, if they deny her, that's when she begins to run. A YouTuber in Bangkok uploaded a reaction video mocking the legend. 2 days later, CCTV caught him sprinting barefoot down Sukhumvit Road at 4 a.m., screaming one word, "Behind!" He was never found. Only his phone, screen still lit, stuck on a paused frame of his own reflection, smiling while he wasn't. Because she was never just a ghost. She was a ritual left unfinished, a mother's grief denied passage, a memory forced to walk over and over until someone dared to run. And now, she runs too. It was a monk who first said it out loud. He stood at the gate of the temple ruins near Ban Na Swan, hands trembling around a cracked wooden bell, and whispered, "If no one looks down, maybe she can rest." But no one believed him, because by then the fog had taken over everything. The paths, the fields, even the mirrors in town began to steam without heat. It had been 62 days since anyone saw the sun rise properly. No bird calls, no rooster cries, only the sound of slow, wet footsteps in the mornings and humming that came from the walls of houses, not outside, but within. The villagers were starving for answers. Until, one night, a child was born with black irises and no reflection. He didn't cry, he only blinked, once, every 6 seconds. And with that, the town finally listened. They met at the edge of the old riverbank. Elders, monks, fishermen, mothers. Some brought incense. Others brought mirrors wrapped in red cloth. But all of them carried salt in old tin bowls and paper sacks, not to purify, but to weigh their heads forward. That morning, when the humming began, no one looked down, not at the ground, not at the feet, not at the hands pretending to be feet, not at the trail of wet footprints leading through the village, not even at the girl who now walked beside the woman in white, her eyes sewn shut with red thread. They stood in silence, back straight, eyes locked on the distant hills. No prayers, no screams, no cameras, just stillness. And then, for the first time in living memory, the footsteps stopped. So did the humming. And a single sound followed, a splash, not violent, gentle, like someone sinking willingly. The fog thinned, not fully, but enough for color to return to the leaves, enough for the sun to try. And in the center of the river, barely visible through the mist, stood a woman in white, waist deep in water. Still, facing the villagers, but no longer walking. She raised both arms, unfolded them slowly, and from her grasp something fell. A bundle, small, silk-wrapped. It landed on the surface of the river, didn't sink, then dissolved, gone, forever. Then the woman did something she had never done. She turned and walked forward. With each step, the fog pulled away from her. The river brightened. The trees whispered not fear, but relief. By the time she reached the other side, she was barefoot, alone, and smiling. Not haunting, not hollow, but human. She stepped into the tall reeds, vanished between them, and did not return. For the next 7 days, the fog didn't come. The villagers began planting again. Children returned to the riverbanks. Even the mirrors held their reflections like they used to. But on the 8th morning, one child, curious of course, asked her mother, "If she's gone now, who's that behind our house every morning?" The mother turned pale. "What do you mean?" "The girl with no eyes. She's not walking like the others. She's crawling." When a haunting ends, something worse often begins. Because rituals, especially broken ones, don't just disappear. They shift, they change shape, and they find a new vessel. After the woman in white walked forward and vanished into the reeds, Ban Nasuan thought it was over. The fog lifted, the humming ceased, the footprints faded. But silence is never empty. It's just waiting to be filled by something else. And that something began crawling. It was the children who noticed it first, not in dreams, not in visions, but in sounds. Scratching beneath the floorboards, breathing behind closet doors, the soft thud of knuckles dragging across ceiling beams. Not feet, fingers. One boy said he saw a girl outside his window, on all fours, mouth sewn shut, eye sockets empty but blinking. She didn't knock, she didn't whisper. She simply pressed her face to the glass and grinned. Then she crawled upward, vanishing into the night sky like a spider into a crack. The monks called it the afterwalker. Not a spirit, not a ghost, but a remnant, the part of the ritual that couldn't pass on, born from what was buried too deep, too painful, too forgotten. The child, the daughter, the one carried in silence while all eyes were on the mother. She had waited unseen beneath the ritual, and now she crawled free. She didn't hum, she didn't walk. She followed anyone who dared to look back at what they thought was over. An elder named Nai Kao was the first adult to speak of her. He had survived the original ritual as a child, one of the few who watched from the tree line as the village condemned the woman. He was the one who had looked at her feet. He had lived with the guilt silent and bitter. But after the river calmed, he thought he was finally safe. Until one night, he felt something stroke his ankle beneath the bed. He didn't move, didn't breathe, until he heard it. Tap, 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 from inside his mattress. He lit a candle, lifted the blanket, and found nothing. But the next morning, the wall beside his bed had this scratched into it. She walked, I crawled. That night, Night Cow was found outside his hut, face down, fingernails torn, as if he'd tried to dig his way down. Others began seeing her too, not standing in the fog, but clinging to ceilings, peeking through floor grates, waiting beneath raised houses, always crawling, always smiling, and always silent, until one person heard her speak. Chanan, a teenager who had once tried to record the woman in white years ago, now worked as a volunteer teacher in the village. One night, he stayed late grading papers. At 2 a.m., he looked up and saw a girl perched upside down above the blackboard, not hanging, standing on the ceiling.
her neck twisted backward, hair trailing to the floor, eyes stitched shut with ash-gray thread. Then she whispered directly into his mind, "They made her walk. They made me wait. Now I crawl to remember what they buried." Chanan blacked out. He woke up in the rice field 3 days later, mouth filled with dirt, eyes swollen shut, and etched into his arm scars that spelled 2 words, "Crawl with me." The villagers tried new rituals, new offerings. They poured honey into cracks, burned old cradles, recited lullabies backward. Nothing worked, because this wasn't a spirit seeking release. This was a shape made from the silence they left behind, the forgotten daughter, the mute witness, the thing under the floor of the story. Now, on fogless nights, some houses hear laughter from their roofs, low, dry, like leaves rustling in a sealed jar. Sometimes mirrors reflect the floor instead of faces. Sometimes crawling handprints appear on the ceiling, inside locked rooms. And sometimes a child wakes up with her name written on their back, in bruises. Because when the walking stops, the crawling begins. There is a room in Ban Na Suan that does not obey gravity. It doesn't float. It doesn't spin. It simply denies down. No one knows who built it. It isn't listed on any map, but children whisper about it like it's always been there, hidden behind the old temple ruins, down a cracked stone path, sealed beneath a slanted roof covered in moss and bone dust. They call it Hung My Talk, the room with no down, because once you step inside, nothing stays where it should. It was found again after the first crawling happened inside the school. One child screamed during nap time, pointing to the ceiling. Not at a ghost, at a desk pinned upside down like a spider clinging to its web, still warm, still vibrating. That same night, 4 chalkboards in the village cracked diagonally, each one with the word scratched into the back. Down was taken. They sent in a man named Wichai, a contractor hired from the city, skeptical, blunt, wearing a steel watch and a laugh that never lasted. He scoffed when the monk told him to carry salt in his pocket. He never scoffed again, because when Wichai entered the strange room, the ground didn't feel right. It existed, but it wasn't loyal. One moment he stood upright. The next, his feet felt like they were pressing against the wall. And worse, his own shadow began crawling away from him. Not fleeing, searching. He turned to leave, but the door was now on the ceiling. They found him 3 days later, curled into the corner, whispering over and over, "She's looking for the floor they buried her in." He would never speak again, except in sleep, and only in reverse. The monks sealed the room, but something kept reopening it. Some mornings, villagers would find the door ajar, and inside, chalk drawings on the ceiling. Not of ghosts, of diagrams, spirals, symbols, bones bent like maps. One drawing showed a small figure with no feet, just hands, crawling through a hole beneath a house. Another showed the woman in white walking backward, but her daughter beneath her, crawling in circles. That's when the monk remembered something, a story older than the ritual, whispered only among gravediggers and midwives,
of the child that was never buried the right way. A body born dead, buried too shallow, one that never found gravity, one that crawls until someone teaches her what down means. He tried to pass the tale as superstition, but that same night, 3 people in the village were found in their sleep, pinned to the ceiling, unharmed, but staring straight down, as if gravity had flipped for them alone. Their mouths were filled with ash, their fingernails cracked in a spiral pattern, and one had this carved in their arm: "I'm not lost, I'm just upside down." Now, Ban Nasun avoids the room, but it does not avoid them. The crawling child, the afterwalker, the unseen puller of gravity, they still move through houses, through hallways. Sometimes someone walking will suddenly trip, but not forward, up, like something tugged them by the spine into the wrong direction of memory. Because when grief goes too deep, when rituals leave parts behind, when a mother walks backward but a daughter was never carried, down becomes optional, and some rooms forget what direction they were built for. Now they say, don't walk in circles, don't sleep with your back to the ceiling, and never ask where down is unless you're ready to lose it. Because in Ban Nasun, when you stop walking, when you stop running, when you stop crawling, the only way left to move is upward, into the places no one dares to name. You can cover a mirror. You can crack it, turn it to the wall, bury it beneath salt and prayers. But a reflection is never truly gone, because once something has seen itself, once it's remembered, it waits, not in the glass, but in you. It began again when a girl named Anya returned to Ban Nasuan after years away. She was just a child when the fog first came. Her family fled to the city, escaping the crawling, the silence, the ritual no one dared finish. But her grandmother stayed behind, and when she died, suddenly, with both feet pointed backward in her bed, Anya returned to bury her. The house had been locked for years. Dust coated every photo. The mirrors were covered in black cloth. All except one, a small mirror above the kitchen sink, untouched, clean, still warm somehow. And when Anya passed it, she paused, because her reflection didn't. It lingered just a second too long, not lagging, not frozen, just smiling. Anya stepped back, looked again. This time, it mirrored her exactly. But as she turned away, she saw it from the corner of her eye, still smiling. She laughed it off. Jet lag, she thought, dust in her eyes. But that night, while brushing her teeth, she noticed something else. The reflection's eyes were not hers. They were slightly too large, too wet, too dark, like something wearing her face from the inside. The next morning, she removed the mirror from the wall. There was a hole behind it, small, round, filled with hair. Not loose strands, braided, tightly, carefully, as if buried with purpose. She dug it out, burned it, and thought it was over. But mirrors don't care about rituals. They care about recognition. By nightfall, every reflective surface in the house had begun to warp, not all at once,
quietly. One spoon held her grandmother's face. The window reflected fog, even when it was clear outside. The screen of her turned-off phone showed her own back, facing away from her. And the small mirror in the trash? It returned to the wall, clean, fixed, and already smiling. She called a monk from the nearby temple. He arrived in silence, carrying a bowl of oil and a cloth blessed with 7 nights of chanting. He didn't ask questions, only looked at the mirror and said, "This is the last one. All others cracked, but this one remembered." He tried to cleanse it, but the oil refused to stick, slid off like water over bone. Then the reflection began to speak, not aloud, inside their ears, a voice young and brittle. "If you forget me, I forget you. But if you look again, I stay." The monk turned pale. He stepped away, muttering prayers, and left the house without finishing the ritual. Anya was alone again, and the mirror now showed something new. Not just her, but a second figure behind her, a girl, eyes stitched, crawling, smiling wider than any face should. Every time Anya blinked, the girl in the mirror moved closer, until one night she didn't blink at all, and the mirror showed only one version of her, smiling even when she wasn't, even when she cried. She smashed it 7 times, but the smile stayed, reflected in the broken shards, on her spoon, in her pupils, in her dreams. And now, they say, the last unbroken reflection of Bon Nasuan still lives, not in glass, but in memory. Anyone who remembers her face, anyone who recalls the woman walking backward, carries part of the smile. Sometimes when you pass a window at night, if the angle is just wrong, if the air is just quiet, you'll see yourself smiling before you do. And if you turn around, there will be no one there, only a shadow on the wall, dragging its fingers backward, waiting for your reflection to come back.
Ghosts are easy to forget, but memory is different. It doesn't knock, it doesn't scream, it just waits until you remember it first. And once you do, it never lets go. By the time Anya left Bon Nasuan, she no longer looked in mirrors. She stopped casting shadows too, but something else followed her. Not footsteps, not crawling, not voices, just attention. A constant sense that something was aware of her, even when she wasn't aware of herself. In Bangkok, it got worse. She'd turn off her phone and still hear notifications. She'd sleep in lit rooms, but wake to find every light bulb shattered. At 3 a.m., every night without fail, her name appeared written in the condensation on her bedroom window. Not by a hand, by a tongue. She called a therapist, then a shaman, then a priest. Each gave her a different answer, but one question stayed the same. Did you see her? Anya never answered, because she didn't know which one they meant anymore. The woman in white, the crawling child, the reflection with her smile, or the thing in the wall that only appeared when she wasn't thinking about it. That's when she met Lert, a man who had survived Bon Nasuan long before the fog came. Blind in one eye, quiet,
He worked at a small night market stall selling matches and salt. She only asked him one question. "How do you make it stop remembering you?" He didn't answer. He only handed her a small piece of paper folded 7 times. Inside was a sentence scrawled in red charcoal. "It only follows those who leave without forgetting." That night, Anya packed a single bag. She returned to Ban Na Swan, alone, with no camera, no phone, no mirror. Just her name and the weight of it. She went to the river. The reeds parted. And waiting there, just above the water, was a trail made of ash, made of memory.
And at the end of it, a figure standing backward, still breathing, wearing her face, but older, tired, smiling like a mother who never forgot what she lost. Anya stepped forward. The figure did not move, but the trees began to hum, not a song, a reminder. The air tightened, the water darkened. Then the voice returned, not from the figure, but from the river itself. "You remembered me. Now I will show you what I remembered of you." And the river rose, not in flood, but in form. Shapes emerged, memories she didn't know she had. Her first steps, her grandmother's stories, the night she first saw the mirror smile. All rising like ghosts made of vapor, reaching toward her, brushing her cheeks, whispering her own voice back to her. One final figure rose from the water, small, crawling, eyes stitched shut. The forgotten daughter, the echo beneath the ritual. She stopped at Anya's feet, tilted her head, and whispered, though her mouth never moved. "When they forget us, we remember harder, but when someone remembers us right, we finally sleep." Anya knelt, placed her forehead to the water, and spoke not with words, but with grief. The way a child forgives a parent, the way a memory forgives the one who locked it away, the way a story forgives its own ending. The fog returned one last time, not as a curse, but as a curtain. And when it lifted, Anya was gone. But the mirrors in Ban Na Suan stopped warping. The crawling stopped. The humming stopped. Even the river began to reflect stars again. Now, when someone tells the story of the woman in white or the child who crawled, they speak softly, with reverence, because they know some things don't want justice. They just want to be remembered right. Every story in Ban Na Swan begins with fog, and every story ends with footsteps. But not this one, not today. Because for the first time in living memory, she didn't walk backward. It was subtle at first. A boy named Paquin, barely 10, ran to the river to collect water. He stopped halfway, froze, and stared. The fog was rising, like always, but the sound wasn't right. There were no backward steps, no drag, no hum, only soft, steady breathing and forward footprints in the wet soil. He dropped the pail and whispered, "She's not afraid anymore." By sunrise, the village knew, not because they saw her, but because they didn't. No pale figure at the tree line, no girl crawling from under the floorboards, No smiles from the wrong reflections. Just stillness, and for once, peaceful. At the temple, the head monk lit 7 candles. Each flame burned upright. No flicker, no smoke moving backward. He closed his eyes and said, "The ritual is finished. The memory has uncurled." But in the old house near the river, the one that never kept its doors shut, something had changed. The mirrors no longer steamed, the walls no longer creaked, and a bundle of white silk rested on the altar. No dust, no rot. Inside it, a single braid, a broken sandal, and a note written in a language older than Thai. It read, "I walked because no one carried me. I crawled because no one looked down. I ran because I was remembered wrong. But now I rest." On the 7th day, a woman arrived by foot. No phone, no luggage, only a scar on her left palm, shaped like a river bend. She asked for no room, no food, just a moment by the river. The villagers gave it to her, no questions, because they recognized her, even if they'd never met her. She stood at the edge, closed her eyes, whispered a name the water had not heard in years. And the river rippled, not violently, but gently, as if it remembered her too. Later that evening, she was seen walking through the village, not backward, not rushed, just walking, normal, and smiling, not wide, not twisted, just soft, like someone who had carried the story all the way home. After that, people began returning to Ban Na Swan, not to film, not to hunt ghosts, but to listen, to the way the wind touched the river, to the way the bamboo swayed at dawn, to the silence that finally felt like rest, not repression, because the woman in white never wanted fear, she wanted remembrance. And now she didn't need to walk backward anymore. She had been walked forward in the stories, in the prayers, in the truth. And the girl, the one who crawled, she was no longer seen, but sometimes in the puddles after rain, children see a little handprint beside theirs, not reaching, just resting. The mirror in the temple now reflects clearly, no warping, no second smiles, but every now and then, just as the fog begins to rise, it reflects one more person in the room. A woman, standing still, facing forward, eyes closed, breathing deep, and finally, free.